Okay, trying to get control of the thing here. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be running a rules clinic, and it's basically designed for everybody in Little League. It's designed for umpires, for managers, coaches, staffs, players. It's going to be focusing on baseball and on the minors through juniors primarily. There are a couple times when we'll bring up seniors. If you're thinking we're, not dealing with softball, we're going to have a softball rules clinic that Ed Newbegin and myself will be running, and that is going to be on Monday, April 6th, whatever that Monday is. So what we're going to be doing is focusing for this one and for the next two on baseball. We're going to try to acquaint you with the rule book. We're going to cover safety issues, and we're also going to introduce the new rules that are up for this year. These are going to be 3 90-minute sessions, and within that 90 minutes, we're roughly going to have about 75 minutes of rules presentation and about 15 minutes of questions. And the clinic tonight, we're going to deal with new rules, with regulations, and with rules 1 and 2. And then the following Wednesday, on March 24th, the same time, 7 to 8:30, we're going to be dealing with rules 2 through 7. And then on Wednesday, March 31st, we're going to be dealing with interference and obstruction, and also rules 8 and 9. So for tonight's agenda, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the rule book. We're going to first start talking about new rules for 2021. We'll talk a little bit about regulations, and then we'll get into rules 1 and 2. We won't finish rule 2. We're going to finish rule 2 next Wednesday. What we're going to be doing is highlighting rules with short video clips. Probably tonight we'll have a fewer number of clips, but when we get into the other rules over the next 2 sessions, there will be a number of video clips that highlight the rules. We're also going to try to answer your questions periodically in the presentation. So embedded within the presentation are slides that read questions, and we're essentially going to have 3 of these tonight. What I would like you to do, because we're going to keep everyone muted, is we have the chat function. So if you bring up your chat function, you will be able to type into that. And what we'd like you to do is, as I'm going along with the clinic, if you have any kind of question, type in your question in the chat feature and direct it just to Don Waddell, our UIC here. And he's going to accumulate those questions, and then during that question and answer period, he'll be asking me those questions, and then I will be answering them. First, actually, before I get started with this, I want to thank a couple of folks. One is Ted Boett, who always encourages us in terms of rules training and also umpire training, and encouraged us to try to find new alternative ways to present rules during this pandemic. I really want to thank our district UIC, Don Waddell, who was a sounding board as we talked over how can we actually take something that we do live in person and turn it into a Zoom session. And also a little shout out to Gerard Takaguchi, who has been regularly sending me links to rules videos, and I greatly appreciate that. Okay, so let's get started here. So what I want to start with is sort of talk about 3 different kinds of rules that we need to be thinking about. The first are the playing rules, and these are in 9 parts, and they're in our rule books. And there's a rule book for softball, there's a rule book for baseball, there's a rule book for challenger division. Within that rule book, there are a lot of different sections, but the 2 that are very important for us for the purposes tonight are 1, regulations, which deal with a lot of different things, sometimes dealing with things like how does a league choose teams, how does it do its draft. We're not going to be going through those kind of regulations, but there are some regulations that are important for us as managers, coaches, umpires, as we're out on the field, such as mandatory play, pitching rules, and also decorum. And then really the heart of all the rules, which is the official playing rules, which are divided up into 9 parts. And as you can see tonight, we're going to be going through the objectives of the game and also definition of terms. And so what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks is we're going to work our way through those rules. So those are the playing rules. That's the rules that govern the game out on the field. What we also have are what are called local rules. And each league sets its own local rules. And what local rules cover are those areas in the Little League rule book where options are given. For example, will a league use a 15-run rule or a 10-run rule or a 15 and 10-run rule or no run rule? Little League allows for a series of options and lets leagues decide on those. Each league needs to establish its own local rules, and what the league should do is publish those local rules on its website so players, managers, coaches, parents, umpires all know within that league what those rules are played, how they're played. And I'll bring up as we go through the rules where rules are local option or not. Now, within local rules, there can be rules that contradict the Little League rule book. But for a league to be able to do that, for example, change the pitching distance, it must be done by a waiver process that goes first to our district administrator, Ted Boet, then goes on to Western Region, and then goes on to Little League headquarters, and they decide whether the league can have a rule that's in violation of the Little League rules. And our third rule that we need to deal with are ground rules. And these are rules that govern a particular field of play. Ground rules must be decided on by a league prior to games being played on those fields. And examples of ground rules are where a dead ball area is located. And we'll talk about what the definition of a dead ball area is a little bit later. Or what happens if a hit ball contacts a tree or a flag overhanging the field of play. Or if you're playing in Albany, what is the ground rule if a fly ball hits that wire that's crossing over the left field on that one field at Albany? So these two ideally are published, but these are ground rules that coaches, managers, umpires should know and go over before a game. So those are different kinds of rules. So let's get started on new rules. Now, you might know that I noticed that I'm putting new rule for 2020 here, and we're in 2021, but we didn't have a season last year. So there really was only one sort of significant rule change in 2020. But since we didn't play, I think many of us have kind of forgotten about it. So I want to deal with this. And it has to deal with the stealing of signs. Now, it's a league option. In other words, a league can decide if they want to enforce this, if they do not want to enforce this, that the stealing and relaying of signs to alert a batter of pitch selection or location is unsportsmanlike conduct. In other words, what the Houston Astros did a few years back. So this is a league option, and the clarification was added to in 2020 that the first time it is done, it will be a warning. And then any subsequent occurrence will be an ejection. Prior, the rule read that it was simply an ejection. So let's look at an example of what would it be for players to relay signs to a batter. So these are both from Little League Regional World Series. Look at the runner on second base. He's clapping his hands, alerting the batter. Now he puts his hand up to his helmet to indicate it's going to be a high pitch. The umpire saw it. Now watch the player on second base and watch her left arm. Here she's signaling to a right-handed batter that the pitch is going to be outside. So one of the reasons that Little League decided to change this rule was simply this. In that first instance, the umpire gave a warning and that solved it. In this instance, in this region, the umpires immediately ejected the player and she couldn't play in the next game. So now they standardized the rule here. It's first a warning, then it's an ejection. Okay, so let's get on to the rules for 2021. So there were many new rules for 2021, and I'm not even going to go through all of them. A number of them aren't so much relevant for us because they deal with things like pool play. But what I want to do is go through the rules that we might encounter during a game during this season. And if you'll notice at the top of each of these slides, I have which divisions it's for. And this happens to be a rule that's for all divisions, baseball and softball, and it has to do with mandatory play. And with mandatory play, there's a requirement, we'll talk about this in a little bit, that a player needs to bat at least one time. Well, prior, it was defined as a player entering a batter's box with no count and is either retired or reaches base safely. Now the rule has been changed to being retired as a batter runner or runner, scores, or the inning or game ends. So what does all this new verbiage lead to? What it means is for mandatory play, and this is only for mandatory play, to be counted as an at-bat, it's essentially saying that if a runner reaches base, they cannot be substituted out for a pinch runner. In other words, they must also run the bases to be counted for their at-bat. What Little League is saying is, what is Little League? It's playing in the field. Little League is being able to hit the ball. And Little League is also getting on base and being able to run the bases. Now, in terms of when this has to happen, it does not need to happen during the first at-bat. It needs to happen sometime during the game. Okay, that rule sort of expanded mandatory play. Now we have a rule that reduces mandatory play. And this simply states that if a league uses 15 to 20 players on their roster, and at least 15 players, eligible players, show up to that game, that the league, and here again, this is a league option, it'll vary by league, a league may reduce mandatory play to 3 defensive outs instead of 6 defensive outs and 1 at bat per game. So this is just a recognition that with 15 players, it's hard to get everybody into the game. Also for 2021, we now have double headers, 1 doubleheader per calendar week allowed for minors. And for majors, instead of 1 doubleheader, 2 doubleheaders are now allowed. And with COVID and with our seasons starting late and trying to get a lot of games in, this is an important change because it'll allow more teams to be able to play more games. This is a rule that deals with establishing a time limit. And this is for baseball and softball, minors and above. Prior, only minors could have a time limit. You could also have a time limit on majors if your game was played on Saturday and you had a whole series of games that were backed up one after another. Now Little League is saying you can, a league, and this is a league option, can establish a minimum of a 1 hour and 45-minute time limit. Any inning which is started prior to that time limit will be completed. So once that hour and 45 minutes hits, you complete playing your inning. but no new inning may start. Again, leagues don't have to do this, but it's a recognition that sometimes games go a really long time and parents and kids want to get out of there. So it allows the leagues an option. What also is allowed now for interleague softball and baseball, intermediate juniors and seniors, only at those levels, is that district administrators overseeing interleague play. And for us, that would be Phil Raines for softball, and it would be Steve Harris for baseball. It allows district administrators overseeing interleague play to allow a minimum of a 2-hour time limit for intermediate and above if those are interleague games. A couple points to make here. One is, regardless of the number of innings played, these games will qualify for regular season games and for a player's tournament eligibility. So what that means is if you have a time limit and you only get through 2 innings, it doesn't matter. It counts as a player playing in a full game. If a game ends in a tie after the time limit expires, those games will not be continued at a later date. This is a rule that deals with on-deck batters, and it's considered a safety issue. And it's saying for those levels that have an on-deck batter, intermediate and above, that the on-deck batter must be in the on-deck circle closest to their dugout. In other words, that the batter can't cross behind the umpire and go over to the on-deck position that's in front of the other dugout. This expands the number of coaches that can be used in baseball and softball, t-ball, and minors. Doesn't apply to any other level of baseball or softball. So this is saying in t-ball, minor league, instructional division, that there can be a manager and up to 3 coaches. And it's a recognition here that if you have coach pitch, you're going to have an adult in the dugout, you're going to have 2 adults on the bases, and it allows you to have another adult who is going to pitch. And also, you know, with the little guys, more adults to give more instruction. This is really important for a lot of leagues that have trouble fielding teams and end up with only 8 players. This had been one of those waiver requests that Little League had been granting year after year for many local leagues. And I think Little League just got tired of granting the waivers, but also a recognition that teams, that kids wanted to play. And if there's 8 players, let them play. So it's now a league option, local league option, that a game may begin and continue with 8 players. Prior to this, there had to be 9 players at the beginning of the game. There had to be 9 players throughout the game. Now you can begin and continue a game with 8 players, but no fewer than 8 players. If 8 players are used, the local league then has to decide, what are you going to do with that 9th batting spot? Will it be simply skipped over, or will it be treated as an out? So each individual league, Alameda, Albany, Martinez, Concord Continental, they're all going to have to make that determination whether they want to use the 8 players and whether they want to skip over that 9th spot or treat it as an out. This is another rule that Little League had been granting waivers on and finally recognized that, yes, this is something that leagues want. Little League is now allowing for a courtesy runner. Prior to this time, it was written in the rule book, there is no courtesy runner in Little League softball or baseball. Now it's allowed, but only under particular conditions. What are those conditions? It can only be for the pitcher or catcher of record. And what of record means is the pitcher or catcher who caught or pitched the previous half inning. And it can only be when there are 2 outs. If a team is batting 9, it cannot be a player currently in the batting order. In other words, it has to be a player who's on the bench and is not in the batting order. If a team is using continuous batting order, and most leagues in our district do use continuous batting order, the courtesy runner must be the player who made the last out. If you use the courtesy runner, this does not remove the pitcher or catcher from the lineup. They simply can come back the next half inning and continue as a pitcher and a catcher. The same courtesy runner may not run for both the catcher and pitcher anytime during a game. And the courtesy runner must be reported to the umpire. Why this is important, and especially if teams are batting 9 and you bring in a runner for somebody who's on base, the umpire needs to know, is this a substitute? Is this a special pinch runner? Or is this a courtesy runner? So for those of you who are umpires and coach wants to bring in a pinch runner, make sure they designate what they're talking about: courtesy runner, special pinch runner, or a substitute. This rule change for 2021 deals with intentional walks. And this is for major and minors baseball only. There is no intentional walk in baseball, intermediate and above, and it applies for all divisions of softball. Now, we already had at these levels an intentional walk, but prior, if a team wanted to intentionally walk a batter, they had to do it before any pitch was thrown to that batter. Now, an intentional walk can be done at any time at the at-bat. So simply what happens here is the defensive coach calls time, alerts the umpire that they want to intentionally walk that batter, and then the umpire will send that batter to first base. And however many pitches were left to make that intentional walk, if it was the batter just came up, it would be 4. If they had a 3-1 count, it would be 1. Those number of pitches will be added to the pitch count of the pitcher. And our final significant rule change for 2021, and this is all about the pandemic. It allows during regular season for a league, and again, this is league option, to have the plate umpire positioned behind either the catcher or the pitcher. We just had a district meeting last night where the recommendation of Ted Boet, our district administrator, was that for youth umpires, they should all be positioned behind the pitcher. For adults who have not been vaccinated fully, they should be behind the pitcher. But for adults who have been fully vaccinated, it's all right for them to be positioned behind the catcher. Okay, went through a lot of rule changes there and fairly quickly. Don, do we have any questions?
Jim, we do. You can hear me good?
I can hear you perfect.
Okay. So maybe there's a general question. Courtesy runner is kind of a new term for Little League. Can you maybe define courtesy runner, a little more specifics?
Okay. Prior to this time, we had what was called a pinch runner, which would be if you're batting 9, you could have a player come in and substitute for another player. There was also a special pinch runner. And during the regular season, this was allowed once per inning. and it allowed somebody who was on the bench to come in and special pinch run for a runner, and it wasn't considered a substitution. Now, a lot of other programs had what were called courtesy runners. And what it was is sort of a recognition that, hey, if you got a pitcher or catcher on base, you want to get them in the dugout and get the catcher to get all their equipment on. Pitcher, you want to give them a little bit of rest. You want to give them hydration, especially a hot day. So those were called courtesy runners to come in for that. Little League didn't allow that. So now Little League is allowing that, but only for those two positions. The whole reason for this is to speed up the game, that with 2 outs, it takes a while for a catcher to get equipment on. Sometimes it also a pitcher coming off the bases. They take a little bit extra time to hydrate and maybe talk to their coach about what they're going to be doing the next inning.
Okay, so given that definition, Jim, can you help answer exactly how does the courtesy runner process going to work? For example, question is, do we have to have the same courtesy runner throughout the whole game for a certain player position or a certain spot in the batting order? Or can I have multiple courtesy runners during the game?
Okay. If a team is batting a continuous batting order, it is always going to be the last out made. And again, the only people you can do the courtesy runner for is the catcher and the pitcher with 2 outs. So it has to be the last out. So whoever that is, if it's Billy, if it's Tommy, if it's Sally, that will be the courtesy runner. If you're batting 9, you can have one player who pinch run or who courtesy runs for the pitcher each time if they happen to get on base and it happens to be 2 outs. But that player cannot also be the courtesy runner for the catcher also. So what this is essentially saying is if you're batting 9, you're going to need to have at least 2 different players. If you want to use anybody on your bench and just get anybody in the action, great, go ahead. But if you want one particular player to be your courtesy runner, they can only be for either the pitcher or the catcher, but not both if you're batting 9.
Okay, can I have a courtesy runner if I only have 8 players in the batting order?
If you have 8 batters in the batting order, if you are using a continuous batting order, well, it would be a continuous batting order. Those kind of questions are going to have to be figured out by Little League. If you have a continuous batting order, whoever the last out was can be that courtesy runner. If you're batting 9, I'm kind of thinking you can't use the courtesy runner, but I would have to check on that.
Okay, so let's switch. We have a couple questions related to, and perhaps maybe I should just directly address these. So one of the questions is positioning the umpire behind the pitcher. Do we have recommendations on how to evaluate if runner leaves early? So my answer will be, come to our mechanics discussion in 3 weeks, and we will talk about some of the field mechanics related to umpire working in unusual positions during, like behind the pitcher as the plate umpire. But I'll just say real quickly, hey, umpiring Little League baseball is always and softball is always a bunch of compromises that happen on the field. So we're not going to get everything right, but we won't lose that question. David, thanks for asking that. And then Jim, there's another question here. Any word on whether anyone choosing not to vaccinate can still participate in Little League? So the answer to that is you need to talk to your local league officials. Each Little League board operates independently, makes their own decisions regarding that. So, I'm not trying to put off an answer there, but I think you need to talk to your president and your league safety officer. Okay. We had one other question. Are we recording this? We hope we are. So we hope we're recording, and we hope we'll make it available. So Jim, those are the questions we have now. There's a couple more we'll keep and we'll carry forward here. So.
Okay, thanks, Don. Okay, so I said that we were going to go through a few regulations, and there are a few very important regulations that we need to touch on. And one of them is mandatory play. This is what really makes Little League a very good and distinctive program, and something that I really love about Little League. And what it's saying is that if you're a player and you show up to the game, you will get to play, and you do get mandatory play. So what is mandatory play? Each rostered player must have a minimum of 1 at-bat, and we talked how that rule changed about what an at-bat is, and a minimum of 6 defensive outs in the fields. Leagues can mandate more. So again, I strongly suggest go to your local rules. If they're not up on the website, ask your somebody within your league, an administrator, if your league mandates more. Many leagues mandate 9 defensive outs, for example. But for Little League, a minimum of 6 defensive outs. Now, there are no exceptions to this, even for shortened games due to weather, darkness, light failure, or time limit. In other words, we're playing a game early in the season and we only get 4 innings in, and little Bobby went in the 4th inning and he got to bat, but he didn't get to play in the field. He did not get his mandatory play. It doesn't matter that that game was shortened and went 4 innings and not 6 innings. What matters is he did not get his mandatory play. So what is the penalty for a team not allowing a player to get mandatory play? The penalty is this: the next game, any player or players who did not get their mandatory play in the previous game they attended, they need to start that game. They then meet the mandatory play for the previous game. So little Billy, who only got to bat and didn't play defense, now will start the next game. He'll get 6 defensive outs in the field. Now he's met his mandatory play for the previous game. But to make sure this doesn't happen to Billy again, little Billy now stays in the game and meets the mandatory play for that game, and only then can he be removed from the game. So this is making sure that managers, coaches can't rig the system, that everybody is going to get their mandatory play. Now, there are penalties on managers in certain situations for not allowing players to meet mandatory play. Will that happen if a game is cut short because of darkness, because of weather? No, this is for a manager and a coach, or a coach manager who is trying to win a game and make sure that a player who doesn't think is strong doesn't get into the game. A few other regulations that we need to go through. Prior to and during the game, only managers, coaches, players, and umpires are allowed on the field. Now, there is another exception, and that would be your groundskeeper if they have to re-chalk the field or something like that. But what that means is when you start warming up, your team starts warming up on the field, you can't have parent volunteers out there. Only coaches, managers, players, and umpires are allowed. One of the things that I do as an umpire when I arrive at a game site is I will go over to the field to check on things. and I will count the number of adults out there. And if there are too many on a team, I will go up to the manager and talk to the manager about that and explain that they will need to only have managers and coaches on the field. So for majors and above, that's going to be only 3 adults. And as we mentioned before, now you can have 4 adults for minors and T-ball. No coach or manager may warm up a pitcher. Now, can a manager or coach play catch with a player? Absolutely. Can a coach or a manager play catch with the pitcher? Absolutely, yes. But once that manager or coach gets down into a squat position and is warming up a pitcher pitching, that is not allowed at any time in Little League, between innings, in the bullpen, before the game. This is done for 2 reasons. 1, safety. Coaches tend not to wear catchers' helmets or cups. And second, most importantly, this is a game for kids. Let the kids catch. Allow more kids to learn the catching position. Okay, during the game, no bat boys, no bat girls are allowed. You can have a player who's on the team with a helmet go out and retrieve a bat. That's fine, but no special players, little brother of one of the players. The players must remain in the dugout unless they're out in the field playing, unless they're a base coach, unless they're in the bullpen warming up, or unless between innings they're warming up another fielder. Otherwise, they need to be in the dugout. They can't be running around and sitting up in the parents or elsewhere. Now, because of COVID, this is probably going to be a little bit different, and I defer to whatever the local league decides on how they're going to run dugouts. That is going to be up to those local leagues. An adult coach or manager has to be in the dugout at all times if there are players in the dugout. So if you have 2 base coaches and you have a manager on the bench and the manager has to go to the bathroom, what should you do as an umpire? As an umpire, you should stop that game and you should bring in one of the base coaches as an adult into that dugout. Again, there needs to be a dugout at all times if there are players in a dugout. No one else is allowed in the dugout. You can't have, girlfriends, boyfriends, little brothers, sisters, friends, parents go into the dugout. Really, the only exception I'll allow is if a player is injured, hurt, or sick. I will allow that player's parent into the dugout to look after their child. Objectives of the game. In the Little League baseball and also softball rule book, what it states that is Little League is in all divisions is a game. And I think that's probably one of the most important things with Little League. It is a game. And so this is a sign outside of Pleasanton Little League, and I think it's one that should be at all Little League fields. I'm just a kid. It's just a game. My coach is a volunteer. The officials are humans. In other words, we're going to make mistakes, and no college scholarships will be handed out today. So remember, Little League is a game, and that a game should be something that's fun and safe for kids. As our UIC for the Western region constantly reminds us that Little League is not a baseball program, a softball program, it's a leadership program. What we're trying to do is we're trying to provide leadership skills to young boys and girls. And we happen to use baseball and softball as the way to do that. So always remember, just a game. It's for the kids. Okay, let's go through rule one and some objectives of the game. One of the things is no handling of bats in the dugout. And this is a safety reason. What it means is that no player should be touching a bat unless they're coming up to bat. Only at that point do they go and pick up the bat and leave the dugout. So what I want you to do is look over at this dugout, and I want you to look at the player who's on the upper step. He has a bat with a weight on it, and I want you to look at the player who's walking behind him. If you think about it, this is a major league dugout, which is very large. Our little league dugouts are very small. These are adults that have a greater sense of awareness of what's going on around them. We're dealing with kids who many times have no real sense of what's going on around them. So this is why we do not allow bats in the dugout. On-deck batters. In majors and minors, no on-deck batter is allowed. Between every half inning, one batter is allowed out beginning that half inning. They can be in front of their dugout. They must be facing the field, so in case there's any errant throws in the warm-ups, they're not going to get hit. In the intermediate, juniors, and seniors, on-deck batters are allowed, and as we noted before, new rule, must be in the on-deck position in front of their dugout. For minors and majors, metal cleats are not allowed. For intermediate, juniors, and seniors, metal cleats are allowed. There are no casts allowed on the field. If you are a coach or manager with a cast, you need to stay in the dugout. If you're a player with a cast, you need to stay in the dugout. If you're an umpire, you don't get to umpire that game. You're not out on the field. Jewelry, there's only one exception to jewelry, and that is a medical alert bracelet or necklace, and we do allow those. We've got a little bit of noise going on there, so if the person can mute themselves, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. We don't allow rope necklaces, for example, any kind of necklace, even if it's of a religious nature, we don't allow it. We don't allow any kind of bracelets, even rubber bracelets. When I'm umpiring softball, if a girl has a ponytail band on their wrist, I ask them to take it off. If they have a friendship string on, I'm going to ask them to take it off. There can be no jewelry in terms of piercings. So if we see a player with an earring, there's one of two options. One, the player removes the earring, or the player does not play in that game. You do not allow anybody to tape over jewelry, like an earring. We do equipment check. It's going to be a little bit different this year, and Don Waddell has sent out to the UICs recommendations on how this should be done. We are going to try to keep to an absolute minimum the touching of equipment by umpires. But what still should happen is that equipment still should be placed outside the dugout. It should be spaced out, and it should be in such a way that an umpire can look at the full helmet, can look at a bat without touching them, and make judgments on the legality and also the safety of that equipment. So let's talk about batting helmets. Anytime a player comes out on the field to be a base coach, to be a runner, to be a batter, to go pick up a bat, they must have on a batter's helmet. When we look at a batter's helmet, what are we looking for? We're making sure it has that NOCSAE standard insignia, which is on the back of the helmet. It must have that. I don't think I've ever run into a helmet that didn't have one. We also make sure that all the padding is fully in place. If part of the interior padding is torn or ripped away, that helmet needs to be removed from the game. We're also looking for cracks, and the cracks especially occur where the bill is meeting the ear flap right there. If a helmet has a cage, and it's not required for either baseball or softball to have a cage, if there is a cage, it must have all its screws in place, and the screws must be tight. A lot, especially at the upper levels, we're seeing a lot of helmet flaps, commonly called C-flaps. And what do we look for on C-flaps? Actually, in the rule book, in Little League rules, a helmet manufacturer notice should be available to the umpire if a helmet has a C-flap added to it. Generally, umpires are never going to ask for that, but know that it's in the rules. What do we mostly look for? We make sure that no new holes have been drilled in a helmet. If they have, we are automatically going to reject that helmet. We also make sure that the manufacturer of the flap, the C-flap, must match the manufacturer of the helmet. In other words, if it's a Rawlings helmet, we are not going to allow a Boomba C-flap. And if you can look on the left-hand side, this is clearly sort of a generic C-flap that has many different holes, and we're probably not going to allow this because it's probably not a C-flap that's from the manufacturer of the helmet. What else is illegal on helmets? Well, any that has a chromy shiny finish, and also helmets that have been repainted after the manufacturer. It voids the warranty. What is also not allowed are stickers. Now, we know that a lot of helmets do have stickers. So what do we look for as umpires? We look for that no sticker is larger than a silver dollar. That's why that one marked lane would be rejected. We make sure that the stickers aren't covering any kind of warning or Noxe insignia. That would be the problem on the helmet on the bottom. We also, as a rule, say that stickers cannot make up more than 20% of the helmet surface area. How does one measure 20% of a helmet? Our UIC, Don Waddell, was an engineer, and I don't think he can even figure that out. Generally, we're going to err on the side of safety, and we're not going to allow many stickers at all. Basically, as coaches and managers, tell your players at the beginning of the season, don't start putting stickers on your helmet. Okay, catcher's gear. When does a catcher have to wear their full gear? When can they only wear part of it? Well, when a catcher is doing infield or outfield practice near a bat, the catcher must be wearing a catcher's helmet with a dangling throat guard. And I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. So anytime you've got a bat anywhere near, that catcher needs a catcher's helmet, not a batting helmet, but a catcher's helmet with a dangling throat guard. At any time a catcher is warming up a pitcher in the squat position, they need the helmet, the dangling throat guard, they need a protective cup, and they need a catcher's mitt. And during a game, the catcher needs all the equipment. And for a catcher, that's the catcher's helmet, dangling throat guard, athletic supporter and protective cup for males, a catcher's mitt, and also a chest protector and shin guards. If this is a female catcher, they do not need the protective cup. So here are the catcher's helmets that we allow in Little League. We have the hockey style on the left-hand side, and we have a more traditional catcher's helmet that we've seen over the years on the right-hand side. They must have the Noxay insignia. It's a little bit different than the batter's helmet insignia. And they must have that dangling throat guard. It can be of a long or a short nature. It can be a metal cage, but it must be attached to the helmet, and it must be dangling. And what we mean by dangling is that when the catcher moves his or her head up and down, that dangling throat guard will dangle and will not be rigid. So what we recommend is 2 finger lengths between the bottom of the catcher's helmet and the top of the dangling throat guard. With the catcher's helmets, we also make sure, does it have all the screws? Are they in tight? Is all the protection inside the padding? Is it there? Is it torn away? If it's torn away, we're going to toss that catcher's helmet. If you have a helmet that doesn't have a dangling throat guard and the team says, oh, we're not going to use that during this game, have the team put that helmet outside of its dugout so no catcher accidentally grabs it. We do not allow skull caps in Little League, any level. Why do we care about that catchers, when they're warming up a pitcher, has a helmet on? Well, this catcher doesn't have a helmet on. We worry about damaging folks. So that's why we have the catcher's helmet anytime they're going to warm up a pitcher. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about bats now. I'm going to talk about 2 different kinds of bats. One's a defective bat and the other is an illegal bat. So we're going to start with a defective bat. In all divisions of baseball, a damaged bat is, or a defective bat is one that's damaged, it's cracked, it's bent, has a dent in it, it has sharp edges. A defective bat is not an illegal bat. If we find one during a game, all we're going to do is remove it from the game. So remove all defective bats from the game. And you can see a couple of examples of a cracked bat and a dented bat here. So why do we care about defective bats? We want to reduce the possibility of this happening. We want to reduce the possibility of sharp metal objects flying out and hurting our players and our coaches. So this is why we're going to be taking out any bat that has a crack, any bat that has 2 component parts and one part is loose on the other. When we shake the bat, it has little pieces of metal rattling around inside. We're going to remove those bats. Okay, that was a defective bat. What's an illegal bat? An illegal bat is a bat that's been altered. For example, the end cap has been taken out and the bat has been shaved off in the inside. That doesn't meet length or diameter requirements, that's too fat, that's too long, that doesn't have the proper logo, or it has an unreadable logo. And all BPF marked bats, all bats that have the BPF logo are illegal in Little League Baseball. And here I'll bring in the softball. Only BPF bats are allowed in softball. No BPF bats are allowed in baseball. BPF used to be the standard for baseball. Now it's no longer allowed. And a bat that has any kind of pine tar or an adhesive substance, sticky substance, that makes an illegal bat also. So what happens if we discover that a batter steps in the batter's box with an illegal bat? If they step in the batter's box with at least 1 foot, and if this is discovered before the following batter enters the batter's box, what is the penalty? The batter is out. If a play occurs at that at bat, however, the defensive manager may decline or accept the penalty. In other words, the batter using an illegal bat hits into a double play. In that case, the coach is going to want to accept the double play, not calling the batter out for the illegal bat. But irrespective, we will always have this. For the first violation, we lose an adult base coach position. We don't lose the coach. They simply go into the dugout. But from that point on, either the first or the third base coaching box will not have an adult. If there's a second violation, the manager is ejected. Any subsequent violation, the new manager is ejected. When we get to tournament play, when we get to the All-Stars, this becomes a much more draconian rule. When we play All-Stars, the batter is out, the batter is ejected, and the manager is ejected. No questions. But what do we always do? Get that illegal bat out of the game. It's a safety issue. What about that at bat? What if a batter steps into the batter's box, the umpire sees it's an illegal bat, calls time and calls the batter out? That counts as an at bat for mandatory play. So I want to sort of briefly just go through bat specifications for each level, and I don't want to go into much detail here, but this is all in the rule book. So for minors and majors, if you use a non-wood bat, metal bat, composite bat, it must have the USA Bat logo. If it has BB Core or BPF, it is an illegal bat. If you have a wood bat, and wood bats are perfectly fine at all levels of baseball, you don't need the USA Bat logo. The barrel needs to be 2 5/8 inch maximum. So you can use a 2 1/4 inch bat barrel. All of baseball, seniors through minors, are all 2 5/8 as the maximum. The bat can't be longer than 33 inches. So if you look at the top here, that is the USA Baseball logo. So for minors and majors, it must have that logo. It cannot have the BPF logo. It cannot have the BB Core logo. The logo for USA Baseball is always going to be on between the handle of the bat and the barrel of the bat, and it's going to be that size. For intermediates and juniors, if you have a non-wood bat, you need the USA Bat or BB Core logo. BPF bats, illegal. If you have a wood bat, perfectly fine to use. Don't need a logo on it. Again, 2 5/8 inch barrel maximum, 34 inches or shorter. So for intermediates and juniors, it needs that USA Bat logo, or it needs the BB Core bat logo. It can't have the BPF. For senior baseball, if it's a non-wood bat, we must have the BB Core logo. If it has BPF or USA Bat, it's illegal. Wood bats, perfectly fine. 2 5/8 inches. We have a much longer bat now. We can go up to 36 inches. And there's one more requirement for seniors, and that's the drop weight. And basically what this says is that the bat cannot weigh more than 3 ounces less than the bat length. I know that sounds a little confusing, but it's very easy to do. All you do is take the length of the bat, subtract the ounces, and if it's under 3, it's okay. If it's over 3, it's an illegal bat. So for seniors, you need that BB Core. That's the only one that's legal. One further thing I want to bring up, there are other regulations about bats, but we do not allow traditional batting donuts in any level of baseball or softball. So that light blue batting donut is illegal. You can use a batting sleeve. And in terms of the middle picture with those batting donuts, you better have them all eaten off before you get to an at bat. But remember the sticky substance rule. So it's possible, even with taking those off, we may have an illegal bat there. Okay, Don, do we have any questions?
Jim, we got all kinds of them.
Uh-oh.
So covered a lot there in that section, and we're going to go back to let's start back in the regulations. And first of all, this might be a bridge back to some of our earlier discussions, but the question is regarding time limits. When does the start of a new inning begin? I've experienced teams who have a lead in the game and don't want to start a new inning. They start to drag it out to exceed the time limit to end the game. Is this the umpire judgment, or is there some official guidance?
Okay, so in terms of the time, we're going to make sure that we have somebody keeping track of time. But once the third out is made, the instant the third out is made, at the bottom of the inning, we are now into a new inning. So it doesn't have to do with, coaches dragging it out. That's when we have a new inning.
Okay. Here's a mandatory play question. Regarding mandatory play, what happens early in the season if games are shortened due to light, or let's say shortened due to time limit? Innings not played don't accumulate. How do we meet mandatory play?
You meet mandatory play by trying to get your players in as early as possible. So I would encourage coaches that in the third inning, you start making your substitutions. Or, if you're on the home team and you're batting at the bottom half of the inning in your second inning, and your players have gotten their your 6 defensive outs, and they've already batted once, think about bringing in a player then to get their at bat. The rule is very clear on this. They need to meet their mandatory play. So you are going to have teams that are just not going to be able to meet that. Just know those players who don't meet it are going to have to start the next game. Again, what is Little League about? Little League is about everybody gets to play.
Okay, here's a question. Hey, I have 5 or 6 coaches on my team. Can I rotate coaches in and out of the game? So I'm not having more than 3, but, bring in one in the second inning, then a different one in the fourth inning.
No. The coaches that you start that game with, we want you to continue with those coaches.
Okay, let's move to some equipment questions. If a catcher's helmet breaks during the game, but the team fixes it, is it allowed to be brought back in and used?
Yes. Say, for an example, a screw comes out and a screw is able to be securely put in. Yes.
Okay, a bat. So oftentimes we see bats that have flaking paint, or the paint is worn off and it's not very legible. Is that a defective bat or an illegal bat, or is it a usable bat?
It's really going to determine by the situation. It doesn't necessarily make it an illegal bat or make it a defective bat. Paint is going to be chipping off that. What you need to be determining, is this more a problem of the underlying structure of the bat? In terms of if things are rubbed off, that's really not going to matter unless it's the logo that's rubbed off. And we see that much because of now USA Bat. We see that much more in softball that has a BPF that's only at the end of the bat.
Okay, now we have a question about proper procedures during the COVID pandemic conditions. What happens if a player had a bat that was removed from the game for some reason and they have to share equipment? What does that share a bat? What does that player do? What kinds of things you recommend we do for that?
This sounds like a question for the district UIC, I think.
Well, I guess the short answer to this is, I think the guidelines now say if you need to share equipment, make sure you sanitize the equipment between use. So just like everything else in the dugout and all the other player equipment, there should be procedures in your league to sanitize equipment. So again, ask your league safety officer how they want you to run the dugout. Okay, Jim, those are the, okay, we got one more. If a coach is ejected during the game, can the team replace that coach in the dugout with an approved coach?
If a coach is ejected, Don, you may want to correct my answer on this, but my belief is that you cannot.
We'll take that one. We'll answer that question offline for folks. We'll provide that answer.
Ready to move on?
I think we are.
Okay, so keeping track of time here, we got about another 15 minutes. We can get through some stuff on Rule 2. And you need to give me power back again, Don, or something. There we go. Okay, so we're going to be talking about Rule 2. We're going to start it today. We're going to be finishing it next week. Rule 2 is the heart of the rule book. These are the definitions. And if you have any time to look at a rule book, I would suggest you start with Rule 2 and you take some time on Rule 2. This provides the definitions, and you need to know the definitions if you know how those rules are going to be interpreted or applied throughout the rest of the rule. One of the Western region rule gurus says about Rule 2 that this is the what of the rule book, and everything else is the so what. Okay, so let's start with actually the playing field and fair and foul territory. So when we talk about the playing field is all of that territory, fair and foul, that is encompassed within, say, the fences or fence line extended. Everything beyond that is going to be what we call dead ball area. So what is fair territory? It's going to be on or above the playing field. And we talk about fair and foul ball. We'll see why we need to have on or above the playing field. That is within and including the foul lines. They actually, ideally they would be called fair lines because the foul lines are in fair territory. So if a ball comes to rest on a foul line, it is in fair territory. All the bases, first, second, and third, and home plate are in fair territory. So there is a myth in baseball that if a ball settles on home plate, it's a foul ball. It's not. Home plate is completely in fair territory along with first and third base. And fair territory extends out to the base of the outfield fence. So that's fair territory. What is foul territory then? Well, again, on or above the playing field, but the territory that's outside the foul lines. We also have something that's called dead ball area. And this was a definition that was added a few years ago to the rule book. A dead ball area is any area beyond any physical boundary, say a fence or a rope that separates out the playing field from the dead ball area, chalk line that does that. The stands, the bleachers, the dugouts are dead ball area. Any ball that's lodged in a fence or a backstop or gets lodged in the catcher's or umpire's equipment, that is also considered a dead ball area. And when a player with a ball steps across a line into a dead ball area, time is immediately called. We used to have something that was called catch and carry. You could catch the ball, go into a dead ball area and return into the field of play and keep playing. No longer. Once a foot steps across that dead ball line, the ball is dead, time is called. So here are some examples of dead ball area. A ball that gets stuck in a fence, a ball that gets stuck in the outfield fence, or a ball that gets stuck in an umpire's pocket or ball bag, which I think happened to our Don Waddell once, or that gets caught in the catcher's equipment. Those are all considered dead ball areas. In a later, when we talk about base awards, we'll talk about what do we do if players are on base and that happens. But we'll be doing that in our next session. Base coaches. 2 base coaches are required when a team is on offense. You can't leave a coaching box empty. Base coaches can be uniformed players. Make sure they have a batting helmet on. You are allowed 2 base coaches to be adults out there, but only if you have a third adult who is in the dugout. And base coaches are not allowed to switch positions during an inning. What is an illegally batted ball? An illegally batted ball is one that's hit by a batter and with one or both feet on the ground, not up in the air, but on the ground, entirely outside the batter's box. Now, the batter's box, the lines on the batter's box are considered the batter's box. So if you have a foot that only a part of the heel is touching the batter's box line, that is considered in the batter's box. What about hitting a ball while the foot is on home plate? It depends if it's illegal or illegal, a batted ball. It's only illegal if the entire foot is outside the batter's box. So if you have your heel in the batter's box and your toe is on home plate, that is perfectly fine. If your entire foot, however, is out of the batter's box and on home plate, then that is an illegally batted ball, but only because the entire foot is outside the batter's box. So the penalty is if you do that and you hit the ball, either fair or foul, batter is out, no runners may advance. So let's give a little example here. And I know one of the persons attending this will recognize the umpire. It's him. It's at a World Series making this call. So I want you to look at the left foot of the batter. So an entire foot, notice immediately calling time. You see this a lot in softball, but it also happens in baseball. So one of the things you see, there seem to be no lines there, but this umpire lined up with the home plate knows exactly where the batter's box is, knows how far it is off home plate, and can make that judgment. Strike zone. What is the Little League strike zone? It's from the armpits to the top of the knees, over home plate. So what that means is a pitched ball that any part of that ball is at the armpits or is at the top of the knees, or any part of that ball crosses over home plate, that is the strike zone. So you can see that red box, and that is the strike zone based on that player's knees, armpits, and the plate. But it's also when a player is in a natural stance and when the batter's usual stance when swinging at a pitch. In other words, if you have a player who comes up to the batter's box and squats down, is that the batter's usual stance when swinging at a pitch? Is that a natural stance? The answer is going to be no to both of those. So both of these are going to be strikes because part of the ball is barely grazing the plate. Now, I would say that if you're umpiring minors and majors baseball, not only should that be a strike, but put a baseball out beyond those baseballs, and that should also be a strike. In other words, encourage pitchers and encourage players to swing. So here we have that situation. This is a Little League World Series. Is this a natural stance? That's how you deal with that. You call strikes. But you could see where that batter was already standing up when that pitch was coming in. So what do we do as umpires? Whenever a player is coming to the plate, what we tend to do is we look at them and we watch them take a warm-up swing. And from that warm-up swing, we can judge what their usual stance is. So if that's the strike zone, what is a strike? And this will be the last thing that we get through talking about strikes. So a strike is a pitch that crosses through the strike zone and is not struck at. In other words, a called strike. A strike is a pitch that is struck at and missed, swing and a miss. Or a pitch that is fouled with less than 2 strikes. A foul tip is also a strike. And we'll next week talk about what a foul tip is and show a video of that. Offering a bunt. And again, next week we will be talking about what is offering a bunt in Little League Baseball. If we bunt a ball foul with 2 strikes, that's also a strike. A pitch that touches the batter on the swing is also a strike. Now here I want to make a blanket statement. Anytime a batter in that batter's box is touched with a pitch, whether they foul the ball off and it hits them, whether they were standing there and the ball came in and hit them, whether they were swinging at the ball, whether their hands were over the strike zone, it doesn't matter. If a batter is hit with a pitch, we immediately call time. So, touches the batter when the batter is swinging. That's going to be a strike. The hands are not part of the bat. A lot of folks think that a player is swinging and the ball hits their hands. That's a foul ball or they're awarded first base. No, if they were swinging, then that is a strike. A good way to remember that hands aren't part of the bat, go to any sporting goods store, go to the bat section. You will not find hands attached to any of those bats. When I pick up a bat and I put it down, my hands will come with me, not with the bat. The hands are part of the body. They are not part of the bat. A strike is also a pitch that touches the batter in flight in the strike zone. A batter is crowding the strike zone and gets over the strike zone and the pitch in the strike zone hits them, again, touches a batter, we're going to call time, but we're also going to call a strike, and we're not going to give that batter first base. So I want you to think about this pitch as a strike, even though it seems it's a batter getting hit with the ball. So he does not swing. And on the surface, we think, and it hits his hand first, we think, oh, he should get first base. But watch, the pitch is between the knees and the armpits. And look where the catcher's glove is. It's going to be over the plate. So that is a case where you'd go time, that's a strike. And this demonstrates that hands are not part of the bat. This player is swinging. The ball first hits the hands. Time, that's a strike. Okay, we are just about out of time here, so this is where we will pick up the next time. And Don, we have a couple minutes for final questions.
Yeah, Jim, I think that we've answered most of the questions that have come up. I think everyone's holding for the rest of Rule 2. There's a couple questions here, again, about procedures for game management, given the conditions around COVID restrictions.
If you want to handle those, go right ahead right now, Don.
What?
If you want to handle those right now, go right ahead.
I am, Jim. So one of them has to do with umpires cleaning balls between innings. Again, your league needs to set procedures, but I don't recommend that umpires clean baseballs. I don't recommend umpires touch baseballs on the field, except in the process of, getting a ball to the catcher or whatever. Balls that go out of play need to be taken care of by the team. So your league should have procedures for doing that. I guess there's some other questions here about, are spectators allowed and those kinds of things. Again, right, we do know that each league's kind of set their own policies about how many people can be at the games and that, and you really need to engage with your league. The good thing is that we've heard your questions, and we will take those back to our district safety officer, who will engage directly with leagues around where some of the questions are. Okay, those are what we have, Jim.
Okay, listen, I want to thank all of you here. Listen, I know that for you youth umpires, you're in Zoom classes during the day. I know that for a lot of you who are working at home or, in offices, and you're on Zoom or other kind of meetings on a computer all day long, I understand it gets fatiguing. I taught, 4 hours today. And so the last thing I want to do is get in another Zoom session. So I just want to say we really appreciate that you come out, that you stick with us with these. And next Wednesday at 7 o'clock, we will pick up with this, with rules 2 through 7. And we'll have a lot more videos interspersed with those rules. So again, thank you. Appreciate you coming out for this.